Beginning of a beautiful season. Our next reader, Rachel Barton, co-chair for the Willamette Writers on the River, Corvallis chapter, is a poet and writing coach. She edits Willawa Journal and is a member of the Calix Editorial Collective. You can trace her poems through several literary magazines and online journals. Her chapbook, Out of the Woods, is available on her website. Her second chapbook, Happiness Comes, has just been released from Dancing Girl Press. For examples of her work, go to rachelbartonwriter.com. And you may find some behind you when we do have a break, so that you can buy some. Welcome, Rachel.
Hello, everybody. It's a real privilege to be here. Make sure you're going to hear me. Well, I hope to read a lot to you, and I felt like she read a few poems, and I have a lot of poems, so I'll need a timekeeper. Ashlyn? Thanks. So this is my most recent chapbook, Happiness Comes. It's on the back table. This collection came together as kind of everything that wouldn't fit in the other piles. It has a lot of prose pieces and sort of questions and openness and imagination. And that's, as I'll explain in my workshop this coming weekend, it's really hard to know your own niche if you need other people to tell you. Once I got a postcard from a guy I knew from school. He'd drawn a picture of our feet side by side peeking out from under a tent. Not that we'd ever camped together or even talked about camping. It was the side by side that spoke of an intimacy I didn't especially want made public. What would my father think? This man from Canada had his ideas about West Virginia. Like maybe we lived in tents. And I had my ideas about him, like his guitar was like my brother's and his music was like Bob Dylan. He didn't like me to liken him to someone else. But I had no other way to know him, to imagine how he might fit into my life. Of course, I was very young. I didn't know yet that he wouldn't fit, which would be a disappointment. But the postcard was a nice surprise. If the orange cones were pawns, I could be queen. Orange cones coax traffic to the far lane, a cluster of men with pressure hoses, transforms in broad swaths the bridge's walk and railing, flogging the grit and gray of winter from every surface and crevice. My own seasonal shift proceeds slowly. I must move beyond my comfortable sphere of chicken dinners and sitcoms, step out where strangers meet and ideas collide, venture a story or line beyond my living room. Chess at the breakfast table is a quick jump to defense. A greater mind than mine fashioned this game. My son, more skillful than I, pushes me to see 6 moves ahead. I choose random. We're traveling to the train station, so it must be raining. The mist excites a halo of hair. I veer left, but my passion flies upward. This is one of my faves. So one night, now, isn't that a great start for a poem? So one night, I'm walking down 5th to the mini mart, and a light rain, kind of a drizzle, which is soaking just the top layer of my hair, and I get to the corner of the block when I notice the smoker on the curb in front of the halfway house. There's always a smoker sitting on that curb, or standing at the edges of the yard, testing the limits of his freedom, the license that gives him a place to eat and sleep and job hunt without threat of immediate eviction. It is both a breathing space, I suppose, and a space in which one could choose to breathe or not, hence the smoking. So I continue my foray to the mini-mart for powdered donuts and chocolate milk, and hug the bag to my chest, hunching over a little against the rain, and I almost trip over the guy who has crossed the street, which they never do as long as I've lived here. I collect myself and raise my head a notch. I can see him looking right at me. Well, I'm kind of shocked. But I shift my bag to my left arm and puff up my chest a little to match this guy and say, "What? What's on your mind?" Well, now he's the one crouching low, embarrassed like, and asks, "Got a donut?" Because I guess he knows my routine about as well as I know his. Why not, I say to myself, and reach in to find the donut with the thickest coat of powdered sugar, which just melts in your tongue, and I give it to him. As I walk on home, I imagine the trail of sugar dusting the front of his jacket, though I don't actually see it. I just know. This next poem is kind of in response to what I hear in my crit groups sometime when they're just not on the same page. What the reader wants. They want to see him washing the dishes, as if we don't all perform this task every day ourselves. They want to see the sudsy water and sponge, the clean dip into clear rinse water, a dish strainer with plates fallen into crisp white arcs, like a segmented ceramic crustacean, bouquet of tines and blades gathered in the corner cup. But I have something else in mind. A young child at the window, watching through the screen from a teetering milk crate, envy and longing clouding her girl face with discontent. Those sudsy hands and children napping in the next room, this is her Barbie dream. She doesn't see the lines of doubt on the woman's face, the premonition of betrayal. Happiness comes, after Tadeusz Dabrowski. In the tall green grass hides a tennis ball. In the fold of the green velvet curtain hides a moth. Somewhere in the neighborhood hides a felon in the ferns, smoking grass and changing nothing. At the same time, someone's faces change, comes out of hiding. From beneath the foggy mirror, a face appears, freshly shaven. In the bottom of the bag hides a fortune cookie. Happiness comes when you face your fears. In someone's dream, your face appears between blades of grass, green as moss, soft as velvet. Pages, after Louise Gluck. I rushed to bed after a late dinner, anxious to turn a few pages before sleep overtook and put me at the mercy of my dreams. This was a habit of mine, to thumb through my poetry books and journals, slipping a scrap of paper next to the binding of a really stunning piece. Sometimes there were as many shards of paper as pages, and I counted myself blessed. But tonight, the stories and poems left me flat and out of sorts, as if denied my fix. And I resorted to playing catch with the dog, non-attentively. She nudged my fingers at the edge of the bed with the damn tennis ball, urging me to take hold of it and loft it over my toes to the door, where she would catch it in midair with a loud thok. We repeated this action over and over until she flattened her belly to the floor and commenced that rapid breathing with the tongue curled side to side and bouncing at the end of her nose. I, in turn, let my arm go slack and rearranged my blanket like an empty page across the width of the mattress, wondering what my dreams would write on it. This is kind of a playful one. Mama's in the bottle and the moon's in me. Don't drink the mother, I was warned. But she slipped between my teeth in a moment unawares and now resides in my belly. Such are the dangers of making your own brew, though kombucha has been around for hundreds of years with no reports of fatalities. It was a slippery mother and nearly colorless, like swallowing a jellyfish or pond scum or a piece of the moon. It's too soon to register the consequences. No studies show anything worth repeating here. No emails to intercept, no transcripts to requisition. There's no data at all. She was young, you see, and grown in such a sheltered environment, barely a slip of a thing, you could scoop her up and carry her off without even breathing heavily. That was a long time ago. Her roots are much deeper now. No one proposes to carry her anywhere. It's a self-portrait after Adam Zagajewski. Between the dog, my dishes, and the computer, half my day passes. One day it will be half a century. I live in a small town with a few neighbors I know by name or by dog. We share our life histories and cryptic snippets at the cluster of mailboxes. I listen to my dog sleep. I watch the rise and fall of her breath, swelling and shrinking her rib cage. Sometimes she dreams something worrisome and whimpers. Shake it off, I tell her. It's just a dream. Dreams are a weakness or a strength. You have to power through the pain, though it may have no name. I read poets, living and dead, who teach me music, truth, and complexity of meaning. I try to understand them, but usually just catch scraps of their precious thoughts. I take walks to the park and back, sometimes into the big woods up the mountain. My fellow creatures show me the way to grieve, to distract myself with their company. Like a magician's vanishing coin, moving from hand to hand, poets can share and erase the edges of scars. Wear down the emperor's head, that old patriarch. The trees beside me are coolly indifferent in their green explosions. Robins pace the wet grass in a studied pattern of early worm. I'm no longer young. No one asked me to undress for the camera. In museums, I remember the artist I used to be. I love gazing at the colors, at my husband's face. My parents live on the other side now, and I seldom see them. Every other year, I visit my big sister in the great land I used to call home. I'm a child of the trees and mountains, berries, and the smell of cedar. When the temperatures rise, I itch to travel farther north. So that's Happiness Comes. I'd like to share a few poems from last year's chapbook, Out of the Woods, which I put together for the launch of my journal, Willowa Journal. And they're all, I guess you would call this lyric in the sense of being a bit of a lament about what is lost. Childhood, early years. Out of the woods. One time when the river was ice and we were kids, we walked to the campus where in some lab my father swirled the elements in a test tube, or maybe held a flask over an open flame, like the alchemist he would become, now merely an earnest scientist cloistered behind a facade of brick and mortar, where monks chanted, and the mother in her stone grotto held the space for miracles. We wandered in a cluster of galoshes and mittens, coats flung open, coming together and spreading apart like electrons or a sheet of starlings in the field. Slowly, our steps crossed the squat at the concrete lip of the pond's edge, the water iced in the shallows, thinning gray-white to dark at the center's deep. And I noticed where some of the ice broke away and floated unattached, which enticed me to test it, as my brother would test the thickness of the pond for skating. So I offered the tentative weight of one booted foot and fell in. This is the wonder of traveling in packs. The older kids knew to pull me out. One of my sisters found Dad and a plastic bag to wrap my foot, my boot sunk forever in the green brown of the pond. We headed home, trudging between the ridges of tire treads cast in ice, beyond the catalpa bean tree, and through the crisp hummocks of frozen cornstalk stubble, back into the woods. How am I doing on time? I remember the first time I insisted my mother cut off my braids. Afterwards, I crawled into the arms of the oak in the Shemke's yard and cried. I remember the old woman on the trolley who smelled like overcooked peas. I blinked as we jostled along, then couldn't stop because someone was watching. But at least I didn't fall on my head into the aisle like my brother, whose brain was just too big for his young body. Once he fell into the urn by the statue of Mary in our living room. Nobody could explain it. I remember when my room smelled like dead animal. Night after night, my father would search the room, the yard, under the bathtub. Then once, when I reached to turn off my lamp, I noticed a rubber band stuck to the crown of the bulb. Boy, did it stink. I remember when my younger sister had mono. She spent the summer in the chaise lounge sipping milkshakes. Grew too fast for her pajamas, so Mom cut the legs off. She would complain as she grew that her eggs laked. Much later, a tall, lithe young woman, she was the kind men tended to yearn for, hard to compete with that. I remember when my older sister dropped out of school, out of her young marriage, the prodigal daughter. Dad was so pleased to have her back, he forgot he'd promised to study with the bay windows to me, offered it to her. I retreated to the kitchen, a heap on the floor, wailing. My father asked the air, is it that time of month? Why is it like this, I asked my sister. We're just waiting to see, she said, how much you can take. This is a last one from this collection of Fledglings and Fire. My brother recited Tiger, Tiger, burning bright at the dinner table at my father's command, my brother's face burning. Later, stopping by the woods on a snowy evening. But I don't remember any other talk of poetry in our young lives, after nursery rhymes and before the black and white television came to our utility room. We had utility rooms then, not mud, but mud lived there too in the sand and duff of the woods around us. We carried it in on the soles of our shoes. Jettisoned at the door, our shoes became a small colony of ships slipping through the locks, a flotilla jamming the entryway. We slid on sock feet across a causeway of waxed linoleum. Farthest wall from the door, my mom's featherweight singer perched on a table next to the washer-dryer, where Mom sorted and folded an endless stream of blouses, skirts, shirts, and trousers. We took turns pressing Dad's easy-to-scorch nylon shirts, which he wore in the lab or the classroom, sweat stains and cigarette burns marring the unnatural fabric, imperfections he covered with a jacket and tie. Somewhere in the night, like the cobbler's elves, my mother stitched dotted Swiss into Easter pinafores and wrestled a swath of green wool into a Chanel suit Jackie could have worn. The church usurped our Sunday mornings then. Downtown parish or college chapel, we filled a long pew in our Sunday best. Scuff of black patent leather and white lace over bowed heads, the girls enjoyed the pageantry, especially knowing it would be short-lived, that the woods and play clothes waited for them. The boys' hair, smartened with a wet comb, flamed above their ears, their creased pants forever high waters. They grew like weeds, stomachs grumbling for a breakfast delayed. This was the form we followed until the mystery faded in the margins of a balance sheet. The church may have died to us, but the woods would always call us home. Woodpeckers perforated our redwood siding in a taunting tat-a-tat, caused Dad to load his shotgun, shoot a jay, much to his dismay, not a conclusive end to the war. Wood ducks, up high in the snag across the lawn, raised young and pushed them out to drop 30 feet and fly or bounce off the duff, a life lesson my parents were slow to grasp. They raised their young over a span of 30 years, nudged each of us through the doors of one college or another, their persistence a slow burn and prolonged enough to ignite our imaginations. I'll read you a couple from a collection I'm hoping to get out sometime this year, which are all concerned with our sometimes uneasy relationship with nature. I have to minimize this. Tented under a thin sheet. We can oust the nests of squirrels and mice from the old farmhouse we reclaimed for our summer, but not the moths clung fast to the ceiling. Not that thick cluster like a field of dark flowers hung suspended above my bed as I sleep. Was it the hall light drew them in? The walls, like breath, close in and expand with a subtle flutter of wings. The room come alive with a prickly strangeness. Can I sleep under that living blanket of soft gray bodies like velvet? Can I calm the hairs of my neck, the crawl along my arm? Warm night, I tent myself under a thin sheet, choose denial and my faith in morning's light to disperse the feather-light shadows above me. A humorous piece. Thank you, Jane. Anita embraces her animal totem, after Catherine Schultz. It starts with nothing threatening, just a couple hitchhikers catching a ride on her coattails. She's flattered at first, but once she has opened the door, there's no going back. They become like a second skin, a carapace of carapaces. They love her radiant heat, and in turn provide for their host a kind of rolling environment that precedes her and comes after, spitting and fitful. They are not great flyers. Nous sommes le punaise du diable, devil's thumbtack to the French. They train her in a hive mind sort of way to couch surf and to secret away behind picture frames or in the grooves of doors and windows. Once Anita fully embraces her animal totem, she has special powers. Her hardened, marmorated exterior makes her impervious to the slurs, and that's not the least of it. In a routine of wearing out her welcome, always mooching off her friends, she deflects eviction with an intense stink, much worse than the smell of rotten fish, so nobody wants to press her. On the plus side, she is not a picky eater. She will eat anything. And of course, her community also eats, sucking the pulp out of fruit through the thin straw of their proboscides, leaving nothing but a pinprick as evidence. They have moved on before decay blossoms like a bruise. Core, cob, and carcass stripped clean. She and her familiar hunker down, deep into couch or crevice, wait for the return of warmer weather. Should her entourage grow ungainly in number, spilling from the attic and closets in a clutter of shield against shield, the mass of them can only be removed with a shovel. It's just too weird to collect them in the whirlwind of the translucent vacuum canister, where you might observe the dark mass slowly suffocating. This is pure conjecture. They're actually very hard to kill. Anita makes an odd life for herself, but she uses the gifts she is given. Who can fault her for that? One minute. Bear woman takes me back. A large woman, grin wide as a river, beckons to me. Her eyes, crinkled and kind, crown the round of her cheeks. I have kept her waiting, but she shows no sign of impatience. I am drawn to her. I step into the circle of her arms and then deeper into the tang of wet fur, into the dark of her. I am at home here. I am inside Bear Woman. She has taken me back. I leave behind the anxiety of a girl's narrow waist, her taut, unblemished skin, to embrace the mass of me, the larger wonder. I lumber along the riverbank, pausing to tongue ripe berries. Soon I will find a den and bury myself for the big sleep. Bear Woman will show me how to do it. Already I find myself yawning through the day, longing for a deeper slumber. In the dream time, we travel the galaxies to deepen our knowing. We are vast. We stand in the center of the earth with our spirit bodies rising to the heavens. I just wanted to add